I'll never forget the moment my trembling hand wrote those 3 words on that white napkin. The air in the Velvet Lounge was thick with cigar smoke and the clinking of ice in whiskey glasses, but all I could hear was the frantic beat of my own heart. My fingers, usually so steady as I balanced trays of expensive liquor, felt clumsy, rebellious. The pen, a cheap ballpoint I'd borrowed from the bartender, scratched against the paper, each letter a desperate plea, a gamble with my life. "They'll kill you." 3 simple words, yet they carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken threats, a lifetime of fear. Marco Valentino sat at his usual corner of booths, a king on his throne, oblivious. His dark eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were momentarily softened by the amber glow of his bourbon. He was laughing, a deep, resonant sound that always sent a shiver down my spine, part fear, part something else I dared not name. The black rose tattoo on his neck seemed to pulse with a life of its own, a dark bloom against his tanned skin. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just any man. This was Marco Valentino, the city's most formidable, most dangerous, and undeniably most captivating figure. And I, Elena Rossi, a mere waitress, was about to thrust myself into his deadly world, risking everything for a man who was both my salvation and my damnation. The napkin, folded precisely, lay hidden beneath a fresh glass of his favorite whiskey. The clock on the wall ticked, each second a drumbeat to my impending doom, or perhaps his. Chicago, November 8th, 1958. The city was a symphony of ambition and shadows, a place where fortunes were made and lives were lost in the blink of an eye. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of exhaust fumes from gleaming Cadillacs and the promise of an early winter. This was my world, the world of the Velvet Lounge, a place where the city's elite and its underworld mingled, their secrets whispered over clinking glasses and jazz melodies. I was Elena Rossi, 28 years old, a woman who had learned early on that beauty was a currency and discretion a shield. My elegance, a carefully cultivated facade, hid a heart that had seen too much, too soon. And then there was Marco Valentino, 34 years old. He was a force of nature, a man who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. His suits, tailored in Italy, hung on him with an effortless grace that spoke of power and wealth. His dark hair, slicked back with pomade, framed a face that was both strikingly handsome and unnervingly cold. The black rose tattoo on his neck was a stark declaration of his allegiance, a symbol of his family's legacy. On his hands, a delicate spiderweb tattoo seemed to ensnare anyone who dared to cross him. He moved with a predator's grace, his presence filling any room he entered. He was the kind of man mothers warned their daughters about, and the kind of man those daughters secretly dreamed of. Our paths had crossed many times in the lounge, a silent dance between the powerful and the powerless. But our connection ran deeper, a tangled history rooted in a past I desperately tried to forget. I had once been engaged to a man named Silvio Moretti, a rival of Marco's, a man whose ambition had led him down a path of no return. That engagement had been a brief, shining moment of hope in my otherwise bleak existence. But Silvio, like so many in this city, had been consumed by ambition, by the allure of power. He had made enemies, dangerous enemies, and Marco Valentino was at the top of that list. Their rivalry was legendary, a bloody feud that had claimed many lives, including indirectly Silvio's. He had been found in an alley, a bullet in his head, a warning to all who dared to challenge the established order. I had been left with nothing but a broken heart and a profound understanding of the brutal realities of this life. Now here I was, serving the man who in a twisted way had both destroyed my past and perhaps held the key to my future. The conflict was a silent hum beneath the surface of every interaction. My duty to survive, my lingering resentment, and a dangerous, undeniable pull towards the very man I should fear most. The stakes were higher than ever tonight, for both of us. Before we continue, drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. The Velvet Lounge was more than just a restaurant or a nightclub. It was a stage where Chicago's drama unfolded nightly. The year was 1958, and the city hummed with a post-war prosperity that masked a simmering undercurrent of organized crime. The lounge itself was a masterpiece of mid-century design. Plush velvet booths in deep crimson, polished mahogany tables reflecting the soft glow of Art Deco lamps, and a long, gleaming bar where bartenders in crisp white jackets mixed old fashions and Manhattans with practiced ease. The air was a heady cocktail of expensive perfume, stale cigarette smoke, and the faint, sweet scent of gardenias from the floral arrangements. Women like myself wore cinched waist dresses that flared out over crinolines, their hair meticulously coiffed in victory rolls or elegant chignons. Red lipstick was a uniform, and every movement was designed to exude an aura of sophisticated allure. Men in their sharp suits and fedoras looked like they'd stepped straight out of a Hollywood film. They smoked Lucky Strikes and Camels, their conversations punctuated by the flick of lighters and the clink of ice. Outside, the streets were lined with gleaming automobiles, a cherry-red Cadillac Eldorado, a sleek black Lincoln Continental, a powder blue Chevrolet Bel Air, each a symbol of status and power. These weren't just cars. They were extensions of the men who drove them, roaring beasts that commanded respect. My shift began at dusk, just as the city lights began to twinkle. The jazz band would strike up, their saxophone wails and piano riffs filling the room, setting a mood that was both intoxicating and dangerous. I moved through the tables, a phantom in my black uniform, my smile practiced, my eyes observant. I saw everything: the furtive glances, the whispered deals, the heavy envelopes exchanging hands under the table. $1,000 in cash, a small fortune then, could buy loyalty, silence, or a swift end. The tension in the lounge was a palpable thing, a low thrum beneath the music. Every laugh could hide a threat, every handshake a betrayal. Tonight the tension was particularly thick. Marco Valentino's presence always amplified it, but there was an added edge, a subtle shift in the usual rhythm. His men, usually a picture of stoic vigilance, seemed more agitated, their eyes darting around the room with an unusual intensity. I caught snippets of hushed conversations, words like the meeting, the north side, a double cross. My stomach tightened. I knew enough about the city's underbelly to recognize the signs. Something big was brewing, and Marco, for all his power, was at the center of it. The air crackled with an unspoken threat, a storm gathering on the horizon. My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs, as I carried a tray of drinks towards his table, the napkin with its deadly secret tucked beneath the glass. The reason I wrote those words, "They'll kill you," wasn't born of sudden impulse, but of a slow, agonizing realization that had been building for weeks. It was a desperate act, fueled by a past that refused to stay buried, and a future I couldn't bear to see unfold. My connection to Marco Valentino was a complicated tapestry, woven with threads of love, betrayal, and a desperate need for survival. Silvio Moretti, the name still tasted like ash in my mouth. He was Marco's rival, a man I had once loved, a man I was supposed to marry. Our engagement had been a brief, shining moment of hope in my otherwise bleak existence. But Silvio, like so many in this city, had been consumed by ambition, by the allure of power. He had made enemies, dangerous enemies, and Marco Valentino was at the top of that list. Their rivalry was legendary, a bloody feud that had claimed many lives, including, indirectly, Silvio's. He had been found in an alley, a bullet in his head, a warning to all who dared to challenge the established order. I had been left with nothing but a broken heart and a profound understanding of the brutal realities of this life. After Silvio's death, I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. My family, traditional and unforgiving, had disowned me for associating with such a man. The Velvet Lounge became my refuge, a place where I could disappear into the background, serving drinks and collecting tips, all while keeping my eyes and ears open. It was here that I truly began to understand the intricate dance of power and deceit that governed Chicago's underworld. Over the past few weeks, I had overheard whispers, fragmented conversations, and seen faces I recognized from Silvio's inner circle, now seemingly aligned with a new, more dangerous faction. They were planning something, a move against Marco, a power grab. Tonight, the pieces clicked into place. I heard a low-level enforcer, a man named Frankie, the fixer Rizzo, talking to a new face, a man with cold eyes and a nervous twitch. Frankie, usually so guarded, had had too much to drink. He spoke of a meeting at the old warehouse on the docks, a surprise for Valentino, a final solution. He even mentioned a specific time, just after midnight. My blood ran cold. They weren't just planning to hurt Marco, they were planning to eliminate him. Why did I care? Why risk my life for the man who, in a way, represented everything I had lost? It wasn't love, not in the traditional sense. It was a complex mix of fear, a strange sense of loyalty to the devil I knew, and perhaps a flicker of the respect I couldn't deny him. He was a ruthless man, yes, but he also possessed a certain honor, a code that, however twisted, he adhered to. And I knew, deep down, that if Marco fell, the city would descend into an even bloodier chaos. My own survival, precarious as it was, depended on the delicate balance of power he maintained. As I approached his table, my hand trembled. "Another bourbon, Mr. Valentino?" I asked, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. He nodded, his eyes briefly meeting mine, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. It was then, as I placed the fresh glass before him, that I slid the napkin, folded neatly beneath it. My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs. I had made my choice. The moment of truth arrived with agonizing slowness. I retreated to the bar, pretending to polish glasses, my eyes glued to Marco's booth. He was still engaged in conversation with his lieutenants, a low murmur of voices punctuated by the occasional hearty laugh. The jazz band played a mournful tune, its melody a counterpoint to the frantic rhythm of my pulse. Every second felt like an hour. Had he seen it? Would he dismiss it as a prank? Or worse, would he suspect me? Finally, his conversation ended. His men dispersed, leaving him alone for a moment, a rare occurrence. He reached for his glass, his fingers, adorned with a heavy gold ring, brushing against the napkin. My breath hitched. He picked it up, unfolding it with a casual flick of his wrist. His eyes, which had been distant, focused on the handwritten words, "They'll kill you." The change in him was instantaneous, subtle yet profound. The casual posture stiffened. The slight smile vanished. His dark eyes, usually so expressive, became unreadable, like polished obsidian. He didn't react outwardly. No sudden movement, no gasp. It was a stillness that was far more terrifying than any outburst. He simply stared at the napkin, his gaze intense, as if trying to decipher a coded message. I watched, my body rigid with fear and anticipation, my hands gripping the bar counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. He then slowly, deliberately refolded the napkin, tucking it into the inner pocket of his impeccably tailored jacket. He took a long, slow sip of his bourbon, his eyes scanning the room, not with panic, but with a cold, calculating assessment. He was looking for something or someone. His gaze swept over me for a fraction of a second, a fleeting glance that held no accusation, only a deep, unsettling intensity. It was enough to tell me he knew. He knew I had written it, and he believed me. The stakes had just skyrocketed. I had not only warned him, but I had also implicated myself. If my warning was false, or if it was discovered that I had interfered, my life wouldn't be worth a dime. But if it was true, and he acted, then I had just saved the life of the most powerful man in Chicago, a man who was both my tormentor and, perhaps, my protector. The conflict between my fear and a strange sense of accomplishment warred within me. He stood up, his movements fluid and unhurried, a predator rising from its lair. He didn't call attention to himself. He simply walked towards the exit, his men, who had been lingering nearby, falling into step behind him without a word. The air in the lounge seemed to hold its breath as he passed. The jazz music, which moments ago had felt mournful, now sounded like a frantic warning. I watched him go, a knot of dread and exhilaration twisting in my stomach. The clock on the wall read 11:57 p.m. The meeting was scheduled for just after midnight. He had 3 minutes. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button. 3 minutes. That's all he had. The moment Marco Valentino stepped out of the Velvet Lounge, the clock started ticking. Not just for him, but for me, for the fragile peace of the city. I watched from the window, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, as he and his men piled into a sleek black Cadillac Fleetwood. The engine roared to life, a powerful beast awakening, and the car sped off into the neon-lit Chicago night. My mind raced, replaying every whispered word, every furtive glance I had witnessed. The warehouse on the docks. Just after midnight, Frankie, the fixer, Rizzo, and his new cold-eyed associates. It was a trap, a meticulously planned ambush designed to eliminate Marco and destabilize his empire. And I, Elena Rossi, simple waitress, had just thrown a wrench into their deadly machinery. The lounge, usually bustling, felt eerily quiet without Marco's imposing presence. The jazz music, once a comforting backdrop, now seemed to mock my anxiety. I imagined him speeding through the city streets, the black rose tattoo on his neck a dark beacon in the night. What was he thinking? How would he act? Would he go straight to the warehouse, risking a direct confrontation? Or would he use his cunning, his vast network of informants to turn the tables? I knew Marco Valentino was a man of action, but also a man of strategy. He wouldn't rush in blindly. He would assess, he would plan, and then he would strike with brutal efficiency. This was the code of honor, however dark, that governed his world. Swift, decisive, and unforgiving. He was not just fighting for his life, he was fighting for his reputation, for the very foundation of his power. Any sign of weakness, any hesitation, would be exploited by his rivals. The vulnerability I sensed in him, that fleeting moment of stillness when he read my words, was a rare glimpse behind the impenetrable facade. It was a testament to the gravity of the threat, and perhaps a silent acknowledgement of the trust he had placed in my anonymous warning. For a man like Marco, trust was a luxury, a dangerous gamble, and yet he had acted. He had believed me. The minutes stretched into an eternity. I imagined the scene at the docks, the cold, damp air, the shadows dancing between crates, the glint of steel, the hushed whispers of men waiting to strike. Would Marco arrive in time? Would he be able to outmaneuver them? My hands were clammy, my breath shallow. I had put my life on the line, not just by writing the warning, but by hoping he would survive. Because if he didn't, if the ambush succeeded, then the men who had planned it would surely come looking for the source of the leak, and I knew, with chilling certainty, that they would find me. The 3 minutes felt like a lifetime, each second a hammer blow against my fragile sense of security. The fate of Marco Valentino, and perhaps my own, hung precariously in the balance. The next morning the city awoke to a chilling silence, a quiet that spoke volumes. The usual chatter of the morning papers, the hurried footsteps of commuters, all seemed muted. I arrived at the Velvet Lounge for my morning shift, my eyes heavy from a sleepless night, my nerves frayed. The air inside was still, heavy with unspoken questions. The other waitresses exchanged nervous glances, their whispers hushed, their smiles forced. Something had happened. It wasn't long before the news spread, carried on the hushed tones of the bartenders and the grim faces of the few early patrons. There had been a raid, a cleanup operation, at the old warehouse on the docks. Not by the police, but by Marco Valentino's men. It was swift, brutal, and utterly decisive. The meeting had indeed taken place, but the surprise had been on the other side. Frankie, the fixer, Rizzo and his new associates, the cold-eyed men I had seen whispering in the lounge, were gone, vanished. The official story, whispered through the grapevine, was that they had left town in a hurry, but everyone knew what that meant in this city. Marco Valentino had acted, and he had acted with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of a predator. He had not only thwarted the ambush, but had also eliminated the threat, sending a clear, unequivocal message to anyone who dared to challenge his authority. The shocking revelation wasn't just that he had survived, but how he had done it. He hadn't just defended himself, he had turned the tables completely. It was said that he had arrived at the warehouse not with a frontal assault, but with a calculated flanking maneuver, catching the conspirators completely off guard. The element of surprise, which they had intended to use against him, had become their undoing. This wasn't just a boss. This was a master strategist, a man who understood the intricate dance of power and betrayal better than anyone. My emotions were a tumultuous storm. Relief, a wave so profound it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. He was alive. I was safe, for now. But beneath the relief was a chilling realization of the power I had wielded, however inadvertently. My 3 words on a napkin had altered the course of events, had saved a life, and had solidified the reign of a man who was both feared and respected. Then came the fear. What if someone found out? What if the remnants of the conspirators or even Marco's own men discovered my involvement? My anonymity, my carefully constructed shield, felt suddenly fragile. I was no longer just a waitress. I was a player in a game far deadlier than I'd ever imagined. The weight of that knowledge settled heavily on my shoulders. The city, for all its glamour and danger, felt smaller, more suffocating. I had stepped into the light, however briefly, and now I wondered if I could ever truly retreat into the shadows again. The air crackled with the aftermath of violence, a silent testament to Marco's swift and brutal justice. The days that followed were a strange blend of normalcy and heightened awareness. The Velvet Lounge resumed its nightly rhythm, the jazz music once again filling the air, the clinking of glasses a familiar comfort. But for me, nothing was truly normal. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every whispered conversation a potential threat. I moved through my shifts with a new kind of vigilance, my senses sharpened, my heart still thrumming with the echoes of that fateful night. Marco Valentino returned to his usual corner booth a few nights later. He looked the same, impeccably dressed, his dark eyes sharp, the black rose tattoo on his neck a silent declaration of his enduring power. Yet there was a subtle change, a deeper gravitas in his demeanor, a quiet intensity that hadn't been there before. He ordered his usual bourbon, and I served him, my hands steady this time, though my pulse still quickened in his presence. He didn't acknowledge the napkin, not directly. He didn't need to. His actions had spoken louder than any words. The swift, decisive elimination of the threat was his silent acknowledgement, his brutal thank you. It was the code of his world. Loyalty was repaid, and betrayal was punished. I had shown loyalty, and he had, in his own way, offered protection. One evening, as I cleared his table, he caught my eye. His gaze was direct, piercing, and for a fleeting moment I saw something in their depths, not gratitude, not affection, but a profound understanding. He simply nodded, a barely perceptible movement, and then, in a low voice that only I could hear, he said, "Elena, be careful." It wasn't a threat. It was a warning, a recognition of the dangerous path I had inadvertently stepped on too. It was his way of telling me that he knew and that he would remember. The consequences of my actions were far-reaching. Marco's position in the city's underworld was solidified, his reputation as an unyielding force cemented. The attempted coup had backfired spectacularly, serving only to strengthen his grip. For me, the resolution was less clear-cut. I remained a waitress at the Velvet Lounge, but I was no longer just a face in the crowd. I was a woman who had seen too much, done too much, and now carried a secret that bound me, however tenuously, to the most powerful man in Chicago. My life was irrevocably changed. The line between duty and emotion, which I had always tried to keep separate, had blurred. I had acted out of a complex mix of self-preservation, a strange sense of justice, and perhaps a lingering, dangerous fascination with Marco Valentino. The city continued its relentless pace, but for me, the world had shifted on its axis. I was no longer an observer. I was a participant, forever marked by the warning on the napkin. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I had survived, and in this city, that was a victory in itself. Don't forget to subscribe. Years have passed since that cold November night in 1958. The Velvet Lounge eventually closed its doors, a victim of changing times and the relentless march of progress. The gleaming Cadillacs and Lincolns of yesteryear have been replaced by newer models, the jazz melodies by different rhythms. But the memory of that night, the scent of cigar smoke, the clinking of ice, the frantic beat of my heart as I wrote those 3 words, it remains as vivid as if it happened yesterday. I often reflect on the legacy of that moment. Did I save Marco Valentino out of a sense of duty, or was there something more, a dangerous pull towards a man who embodied both the darkness and a strange, undeniable allure of this city? Perhaps it was both. I had seen the brutality of his world, the unforgiving nature of its code, but I had also witnessed his capacity for decisive action, his unwavering resolve. He was a product of his environment, a king in a kingdom built on shadows and blood. My act, a simple warning on a napkin, had ripple effects that extended far beyond that single night. It solidified Marco's power, yes, but it also, in a strange way, gave me a voice, a moment of agency in a life where I often felt powerless. It taught me that even the smallest act of defiance, born of desperation, or a flicker of courage, could change the course of destiny. I never spoke of it again, not to anyone. It became my secret, a heavy burden, and a strange source of strength. The city moved on, its stories replaced by new ones, but the tale of the waitress and the Mafia boss, the warning on the napkin, became a silent legend in the annals of my own life. It was a testament to the thin line between life and death, between loyalty and betrayal, and to the enduring power of a single desperate act in the heart of a dangerous city. And sometimes, late at night, I still feel the phantom tremor in my hand, remembering the moment I dared to write, "They'll kill you." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more tales from the shadows of Chicago's past. Your support helps us bring these forgotten stories to life. We appreciate you joining us on this journey.